Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
2% of Michigan voters remain undecided in the race for president. That's according to new polling by the Glengariff Group for the Detroit News and WDIV.
With how close this election appears to be, 2% could make the difference in this race. In 2016, Trump won Michigan by 0.2%. 4 years later, Biden won Michigan by 2.7%.
So we are turning to two folks today who are taking their message to undecided voters in the state. First, we turn to Pete Buttigieg. He is joining us in his capacity as a surrogate for Vice President Kamala Harris. So, Pete, that same poll shows that Harris is up by 3 percentage points over former President Donald Trump. But that is within the margin of error. What do you make of just how close the election is in Michigan?
Well, I think it reflects that we're not just politically divided, we're divided in terms of where we get our information. And so certain things, even facts about what's going on around the state or the country and the world, are talked about very differently or not talked about at all, depending what media you follow. It's one of the reasons I try to spend a lot of time on conservative media or media that are not followed by some group that is most likely to fall into a certain category that already agrees with me. Because I think a lot of Americans literally have not heard about the fact that crime is down. So even though they feel like that's happened in their neighborhood, they think the opposite has happened around the country. Many people have noticed that they have a job and that there's lots of job openings around them, but they think that the United States is in a recession because of what they hear. And I could go on down the list. So we're trying to make sure that people not only hear our arguments about what to do next and which values ought to prevail, but also that we get more of a kind of a shared reality going so that your understanding of what's happening around you doesn't depend on what you already believe or what media you happen to follow.
This is the big $1 million question, but what can we do to actually make that happen? We have this conversation about the need for shared facts, but how does that work day to day?
I think the key is to make sure, at least as far as what those of us in public roles should do, the key is to make sure that we're actually talking in terms that relate to everyday life. And you'll notice that the Trump campaign is trying to have us talk about anything but. I think every time they take the election to a new height of outrage, it's to make sure we're not talking about the things that most people can agree they want from their elected officials in their government. Most people want a politics that is looking out for their rights and freedoms, including having the right to choose restored after it was taken away by Donald Trump. Most people want to know that there's going to be a fair tax code, not so much the tax cuts for the wealthy that were championed by Donald Trump, but a tax code where the wealthy pay their fair share and the rest of us do our part. All of these are things that I think we can break down into an everyday level, but not if we're giving into this noise machine that wants us talking literally about cats and dogs or whatever the outrage of the day is going to be.
Well, speaking of, I recently heard someone say that in this campaign and campaigns previously, Republicans distract and Democrats get distracted. Is that fair?
I think that's fair up to a point. I think part of the dynamic here is that sometimes they do things that you have to respond to, and yet you cannot allow them to change the subject. So when Donald Trump went to an auditorium full of Black journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and made racist comments about the VP there, of course, you got to say something. You can't let that go unanswered. The challenge is, how do you do that if you have to say something and not be playing his game? And part of what I admire about the VP is she took it up, she addressed it, she condemned it, and then she moved on. And I think that's what we have to do every time the outrage machine gets cranked up, as it undoubtedly will in the final days before the bell rings on this election. I think the Madison Square Garden rally is another example. When you have somebody there with Donald Trump's blessing refer to the entirety of Puerto Rico as garbage, of course you got to say something about that. But we don't get so sidetracked that we can't actually talk about how people's everyday lives, whether you're Puerto Rican or whatever your background might be in any state in the U.S., how your life's going to be different if she's in charge, working on things like getting you paid family leave and expanding the tax credit, versus if he's in charge and more of our rights disappear and he pulls the rug out from under the clean manufacturing industry that is one of the reasons why pretty much everybody in the building trades in Michigan has jobs building factories right now.
What is your message this late in the game to this small but critical group of undecided voters?
I was just with a group of undecided voters in Grand Rapids yesterday. They are not undecided because they're uninformed. Many of them are undecided because they've been frustrated with the two-party system, or what they're really undecided on is not so much how to vote, but whether to vote. So my message to them is that one of two things is going to happen. Either Donald Trump will become president or Kamala Harris will. And if you're not voting for Kamala Harris, then in effect, you are helping Donald Trump. I think that's something that's especially important for people to hear who are just skeptical of everything they see and hear from anybody in public life. And then there are those who usually vote Republican. They tend to prefer Republican policies. We might not agree on all of those policies. But I found that for many of them, this is not a policy election anymore. Matter of fact, in Pennsylvania a few days ago, I found myself on stage with a number of prominent Republicans who were part of this campaign. I don't think I've ever seen a moment in American history where more people from a given party campaigned with the opposite party. There's never been this many Republicans saying you should vote for the Democrat this time, not because we've changed our mind about the issues, but because more is at stake. And I think that's a message that is important to reach Republican friends with who, may not agree with us on fiscal policy or this or that issue of social policy, but do believe that we just need a better character of leader than what we already know Donald Trump represents.
Do you think these undecided voters or even moderate Republicans hear you?
Well, our job is to make sure we keep reaching out to them. And that's, again, why you see a lot of non-traditional media interviews by Kamala Harris trying to get through to people who maybe aren't sitting watching MSNBC or following her on Twitter. It's why you're seeing, again, a lot of Republicans campaigning with her. Here in Michigan, Fred Upton, who was I grew up very close to his district because it's the one that bordered Indiana, a really respected figure in the Republican Party. And just the latest example of somebody saying, hey, I might not agree with her on everything, but right now the choice is clear. It's got to be her.
We're speaking with Pete Buttigieg. I've been thinking about talking to you today and thinking about you as this sort of a bridge between age. You're a millennial, but you work, of course, for the oldest president in history and with cabinet secretaries, many of whom are decades older than you. You're a bridge between regions, right? You work in Washington, D.C., but you live right now here in northern Michigan. And a bridge in media, as you mentioned, right? You're a Democrat, but you often go on Fox News. This role of translator between country, between age, what does it mean to be in that role right now in American politics?
I think at its best, politics is all about connecting different people, different communities, different pieces of the puzzle into a bigger picture. So anytime that I can reach people across what used to be a boundary or a divide, ask people to consider something they haven't thought about before, urge people to cross traditional party lines or cultural lines. I view that as kind of the highest and best work that you can be doing in politics and public life. I really embrace that role because I think it's one of the best ways you can make yourself useful in the political space. And what I found is that if you take people seriously, it's not that you'll magically win them over with a clever argument or a brilliant turn of phrase, but they'll understand that you come by your views honestly, and they'll be more open to sharing theirs and looking for common ground.
Is it a difficult position to be in?
It can be, but I think it also comes naturally to me. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Indiana, but my parents were from different parts of the country, and my father's case a different part of the world, and learned a lot how to bridge kind of the family history and heritage that I grew up with the neighborhood around me. I never felt more Midwestern than when I left to go to college and realized how much I cared about where I came from. But then when I came home, I was partly defined in the eyes of some of the people I grew up with as somebody who'd gone away and come back. So I think it's a space that I've just found myself in often, and certainly generationally. became very used to being the youngest person in the room, whether it's in a cabinet meeting or in the environments I was in as mayor, and found that there's a lot. There's a lot to that. A lot of the joy of being involved in public life is finding unlikely connections and unlikely rhymes between how very different people wind up looking at the world.
And finally, with less than a week to go, what's keeping you up at night?
Well, of course, I think anyone who cares about the outcome of this election is transfixed by how close it is. And again, there are many reasons why, much of which I believe has to do with our media environment. But it means that every single vote, every single precinct and district and state could be decisive. And what's got me up at night is asking, have we done everything that we can to reach everyone we need to reach, whether it's to persuade them to vote with us or whether it's to persuade them to vote, period. And that's what my energy will continue to go to. I know that's what the VP is very focused on as well. And if we get that job done, then I'm hopeful that we will wake up on Wednesday satisfied in the results of our efforts.
Pete Buttigieg joining us in his capacity as a surrogate for Vice President Kamala Harris. Pete, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. Great being with you.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to Pete Hoekstra, chair of the Michigan Republican Party. So we're talking about this poll that shows the race for president in Michigan incredibly close. Harris up by 3, but within the margin of error. Chairman, what do you make of why it's so close right now in Michigan?
Well, Michigan historically has been a very, very close state. We are evenly divided. We've got the folks over in the west side of the state, east side of the state. That used to be the divide. I think Michigan is different today, but it's still very evenly divided between Republicans, Democrats, and independents.
But even up to 8 days, 7 days before the election, I mean, you've known Michigan politics long enough. We've never really seen it like this before, have we?
Well, 2016, the polls were very, very different. They had Clinton up by 7 or 8 points at this specific time in the 2016 election, but Donald Trump came back, won by less than 1%. In 2020, Joe Biden won with around 2.8%. So the last 2 presidential cycles have been very, very close.
So I want to quote the pollster Richard Schuba, who did this survey. And he says, and this is a quote, 2024 now represents the most gender-split election of our lifetimes. In Michigan, he found Trump leading among men by 21 percentage points, Harris leading among women by 24 points. What do you make of that?
Make that as a very, very interesting statistic and points out, the very clear difference. You've got a businessman from the Northeast and you've got a politician from San Francisco. So you've got both coasts represented, but with very, very different agendas. And the polls would tell you that one of those agendas appeals very much to women voters, the other one to male voters, and tells you the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate.
So with this idea that there is something like 2% of undecideds right now in Michigan, what is your message to those folks who are still not sure how they're going to vote?
Our message is very straightforward. Donald Trump represents the kind of change that America needs. We don't want to have a replay of the last 4 years under Biden and Harris, where we had high inflation, open borders, and those types of things. We want a strong economy. We want to close the border. And specifically for Michigan, Donald Trump has a vision to really rebuild the auto industry and once again make Detroit and Michigan the capital of the auto industry, not only in America, but for all of the world.
Do you think that Michigan voters are hearing that specific message from the former president?
I think they're hearing very much about the automobile industry. Absolutely. When you're spending a significant amount of your time, talking about the impact that electrical vehicles will have on the auto industry in Michigan, putting massive subsidies into supporting what many will say will benefit the Chinese Communist Party, Chinese companies, and not America and not the American auto industry. I think that has become really one of the dominant issues in this campaign.
When we're talking about undecided voters, do you think the messages that we're hearing right now, I'm thinking about the rally that was held in New York, do you think that helps undecided voters make up their mind in Michigan?
I hope so. I mean, I thought it was a great rally. We are talking about, bringing America together. We're talking about bringing America back. A very positive and inclusive message was delivered out of Madison Square Garden on Sunday.
An inclusive message? There are many that would disagree with that.
Well, they might. I mean, they can look at it and they can watch it and they can reach their own conclusion. I think very obviously we're reaching out, to Americans of across the board and saying there is a home for you in this Republican Party, and we look forward to working with you. Absolutely.
Chairman, how has the Republican Party changed since you served in Congress? And that was between 1993 and 2011.
Yeah, what's really changed is we really have become the party of the blue-collar workers. I always had a great relationship with the Teamsters. Jim Hoffa was and continues to be a friend of mine. But, typically that's not how people perceive the Republican Party. But we've become the party of the blue-collar working man and woman across the state. And I think that's a place that I'm very, very comfortable with, and I'm excited about. That's where we are. Donald Trump, accelerated that movement in 2016, talking about forgotten part of the country, the flyover country. And he's continuing it in this cycle by talking about the men and women across the country who have been left behind by the Biden and Harris administration.
With less than a week to go until the polls close, what keeps you up at night?
Well, what keeps me up at night is, the uncertainty. We really don't know. In 2016, the polls were horribly wrong. In 2020, they were wrong again, maybe not quite as bad as 16. So all of this data that we've been receiving over the last 3-4 months, but especially the last 4 weeks about, hey, the momentum is moving here or there. American voters have a way of surprising people on Election Day. So, I'd like to think that what I'm seeing in the polls is accurate, that Donald Trump has an easier path to 270 electoral votes than what Harris does. But I worry about that every day. And that's why we as a party are working so hard to make sure that the desired reality that we want or the desired outcome that we want will be the reality on November 5.
Okay. That is Pete Hoekstra, chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Always great to be with you. Thank you.
And if you are looking for more resources, maybe about some voter guides, looking for more information about candidates or early in-person voting or what to expect on Election Day, head to michiganpublic.org/election. We have got you covered. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
We will talk to you again 1 week from now, one day after Election Day. Take good care.